So let's tie in PaperCut on this conversation. So Tyler, how is it that, or really, just tell us a little bit about how PaperCut and Imprivata work well side by side, knowing that Imprivata helps with access management.
Yeah, I mean, so historically we have pretty much just been able to operate or coexist in similar environments. So right now, we don't necessarily have like a direct integration where our app is talking to them directly, but we're operating in similar environments in such a way where, for example, like they work really well with Citrix and VDI environments. They're feeding into Citrix, we're kind of feeding off of Citrix, so it's sort of an integration by proxy almost. So it's a really effective way to kind of centrally manage your identity and access, and obviously PaperCut can kind of just work in that type of environment without an issue. And we're kind of into the discussion of making it, Facebook official, so to speak. So we're kind of starting the conversations to make this more of a direct relationship. So I mean, as that moves forward, we can speak even further on that.
That's fantastic. So Citrix is one of the areas that I wanted to focus on a little bit for this conversation. By the way, we're going to talk about it a lot more tomorrow as well. But Citrix and VDI is something that we're seeing in a lot of healthcare environments. Now, whether or not they're tying that into the conversation of secure print is really what's becoming the question. Now, when users are logging into a Citrix environment, typically they're then logging into an EMR. So could you tell me a little bit about the EMR support that PaperCut has and what we know to be working well with PaperCut today as far as EMRs go?
Yeah, well, you all have seen me talk at least for a little bit now about EMRs and stuff. So we're bringing a lot of focus to this on both, kind of a team discussion level. So from my team, like tech services, we're going to be talking a lot more educated about this stuff, as well as developmentally. So we're building integrations. For example, Epic, we're directly integrating against. We have also, we know this is a hot topic issue, and so we have development resources committed to this stuff to make sure that this stuff is as smooth as you need it to be to get this stuff, working well. So it's a whole organizational effort wherein, we are listening to you, we want to hear your feedback, and we're ready to kind of be flexible and make stuff work even further than the integrations we have already.
Hey Tyler, in your session you had downstairs, which is really good as well too, I was kind of curious, a lot of discussion in healthcare's print deploy as well too.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're working on your Citrix environments and your integration, how does print deploy improvements in that environment? Do you see coming as well?
Yeah. Print deploy, without giving the whole presentation away tomorrow.
Give us a teaser.
Yeah, we're working to improve our relationship with Citrix at a programmatic level. So right now we're already, probably 90% of all use cases we're going to be working just fine in a virtual desktop environment. Since Citrix is such a heavy hitter, we want to make that a little bit more tight of a bond as well. So that's kind of in the books. More on that later.
So a couple names I want to throw out there for EMRs, and I'm sure y'all would agree that these are probably the top four, but maybe it's different based on where you're at. But I would lean to say that the top four EMRs that we run into for ecoprintQ, Epic, obviously one, Cerner, that would be another one, Meditech, and Allscripts. Anybody disagree with that top four list? Meditech's a big one, right? Been coming up? No? Not as much? So the nice thing about when you think of these different EMR systems, if you think about where they're at with the type of technology that they can provide for different customers, there's a lot of fluid movement between EMRs. The best thing about PaperCut is regardless if we're using an Epic connector or the direct print monitor or different things, a lot of them are supported out of the box. So even if it's not one of those four names and you walk into a healthcare organization and they mention an EMR system, there's a couple of good questions that you can ask just to validate how printing works for that EMR to then decide if PaperCut will support it. Because kind of like what he was saying is with our flexibility, we can support it well. What do you have to say?
With the culture sharing EMRs. Do you find greater acceptance within that because there's as much support out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you have teams on both like ecoprintQ team and PaperCut side that are willing to kind of come to these talks and facilitate this stuff to make sure that it's working, that discussion goes over pretty exceptionally well when you've got people that care about you and your success and the rollout success all coming together to kind of back you up on this. It makes stuff like that for those kind of lesser known environments go over just as smooth.
We've seen and done a lot of customer conversations. The one I'm going to ask you about is, have we seen an increased demand for Citrix environments and with VDI? And then I've got a follow-up question to that is, do you have any idea why you might be seeing that increase?
So in healthcare, we see it more because, you get so involved in their print workflows because you have to, right? So normally, environments, you talk about the print workflow, it's pretty simple and straightforward. But in healthcare, it's not, right? You're talking about the EMR printing, you're talking about front-end, back-end printing, and inevitably, Citrix VDI comes up, right? Oh, some of our users, are running Citrix sessions, and how can, PaperCut manage that piece, right? And the good news is it can, right? So that's good, right? You're never bounced from the conversation. It usually comes up, and usually it's because they're interested in their entire architecture and how they can track it, right? And monitor control. Otherwise, they wouldn't care, right? Now, in some situations, it's not as big of a concern, and you move past it. But in others, it's an important component, and you compartmentalize it and separate it out and say, okay, that's something else. We're gonna, that's part of the implementation. We'll architect for that. And move forward.
Beautiful. One of the things that Tyler spent a good amount of time talking that y'all hopefully heard today was Epic support, right? The Epic connector, the different ways we can support it. Paul and I work with a lot of our resellers to actually roll through an implementation. So Paul, we have two different ways that we typically go into an Epic environment and set up the support for it. Can we talk about just real quick the two ways and what we typically end up doing? Knowing that there is the Epic connector and it is available, but just talking about the two ways we can support Epic back-end printing today and what we typically end up doing.
Right, so back-end printing, obviously, cues right out of Epic. So, the two options, obviously, are the connector and a direct install with the print provider. In the past, prior to certification with Epic, it was a pretty big pushback. No, can't install directly. I think that is lightning, right? So that's obviously the preferred path in most cases, not all, because it's easier, it's proven, right? And it's a simpler path. So that's one method, right? Direct install on Epic. If they allow it, if they manage their Epic servers, usually they'll allow it. But it's a conversation with them, conversation with the Epic people, to make sure that they'll move that path. If not, we have to connect.
So the way I take it is, if you've got a customer who has Epic, but they're managing hosting itself, we're probably going to lean towards being able to do the direct print monitor, the actual direct install that's going to go on the EPS's Epic print servers.
Yes.
If it's hosted either by Epic or some third party who's managing Epic instance, that's probably more going to lean towards the Epic connector being the approved app orchard connector.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, in the other environments, there's always support, and you can use queue redirection, right? So you can, have the EMR set up to redirect queues to a PaperCut server that can then grab those jobs and manage them.
What have you seen as it relates to increased security requirements for healthcare?
Well, so no question, the alarming rise of cybersecurity threats and ransomware attacks have seen an increased demand with secure access to information and resources. According to latest cybercrime statistics, healthcare has the largest total average cost for data breach at more than $9 million.
That's a lot of dollars.
more than 80% of a data breach is caused by either a leak or a stolen password. And Microsoft has stated that if a user enables MFA, they'll be able to log more than 99% of any cybercrime activities.
What is MFA?
Multi-factor authentication.
So if we implement multi-factor authentication, things like being able to tap a card and then present a PIN code, or tap a card and do a mobile credential, or even a biometric, you're saying 99% of those threats can be mitigated.
According to Microsoft, the leading authority in that space, that's the case.
You heard it from the man, it's his quote, he's claiming it.
But let me add a point too. So from an RFID's perspective, we've taken steps to address these concerns. With MFA, right? So we introduced a mobile reader, mobile Bluetooth reader, where you can use both a mobile credential on the phone or a badge to authenticate on that reader. Two-factor reader. We've also introduced a biometric reader, where not only you can use fingerprint, but you can use mobile credential and a badge to authenticate on that same reader, a true multi-factor authentication reader.
Question, you have one,
For you,
and the question for PaperCut, because you support that reader.
I can help answer it, you wanna go ahead?
Feel free to start, but I'll chip in.
So you're always going to want to engage us on multi-factor authentication credentials and setup for a customer that we're going to be doing for PaperCut specifically. Technically wise, I can let Tyler speak to what we can do today and what's available. So why don't we start there and I'll wrap up.
Yeah, so the process of our card identification is pretty darn straightforward, right? It's taking a alphanumeric input, it's matching it to a user, and it's saying, good to go, you're you. So as long as we can distill an input, regardless of the device, down to that alphanumeric number that's sticking around, that's unique to that user, we can use it. So
Yeah, but my question is like, so they want two-factor authentication. You're providing a great reader that can go swipe your badge, put your thumbprint on it. How does PaperCut react to something like that? Does it go, I swipe my badge, and PaperCut says, put your thumbprint on there? Like, what does PaperCut tell to make sure they're doing that two-factor authentication?
I was going to say,
let me answer that a little bit. So maybe to your point, so there needs to be an SDK integration that needs to happen on the solution side that would then support the fingerprint output and convert that into a decimal or hexadecimal or whatever the output that we consume by the PaperCut application, right? And then equally, on the hardware side, the MFP in a print scenario would need to have a driver that would support the fingerprint as well. So that's the setup that we have. And
yeah. When it comes to mobile and mobile authentication too, just to kind of jump in and chime in on that last part, watches, phones, all of these great things already provide a great way to do two-factor authentication. Why? Phones have fingerprint scanners, they have passcode requirements, so if they're leveraging managed devices, aka they gave out the phones for all their employees, here's an easy 2-in-1 multi-factor authentication conversation as well. So don't ever limit the multi-factor authentication just to what's being done at the reader level. There's also apps and things like that can be supported as well. But what are some of the trends that you're seeing, such as requirements or types of requests that you're getting from your customers?
Well, a couple things. First of all, we are seeing a lot of healthcare organizations changing their EHR providers. It used to be like, this is what we use. But for instance, locally in the Midwest, we're seeing a lot, even the East Coast, we're seeing a lot of organizations dumping Meditech, going to Cerner, going to Epic. So there's been a lot of change, which also means a lot of the opportunities that we were kind of locked out of in the past have opened up because there's change. And it's been because of security requirements, it's been because of improvements. It's also based on turnover. We're seeing a lot of IT staff moving between healthcare organizations and kind of bringing their favorite processes and security requirements and everything with it. So it's one of those things where we've been revisiting some things that we kind of like put on the back burner and finding opportunity just because of that change. Nothing's static, and whatever whatever Salesforce says they were doing 2 years ago, don't trust. Get back out there and find out what they're doing today. Especially at the mid-sized level, a lot of change. And probably the biggest thing has been what we're talking about today, changing to hosted EHRs.
Yes.
Right? So like if they had a certain provider that was on site, everything is getting pushed to the cloud, whether it's hosted in the private cloud or have you, and that's where we're seeing a lot of that change.
There's also a lot of M&A in the healthcare space now, like it's going on all over the place. And so, of course, M&A, when a large organization acquires other ones, eventually they want to streamline and put everybody on the same EHR, so that also, introduces that change factor.